What's up, everyone? On today's show, I'm going over all the Week 4 matchups. Plus, I'm going to react to the Thursday Night Football game coming right up. What's up, everyone? You're listening to the Gridiron Fantasy Football podcast, and welcome to the show. Today is Friday, October 2nd, 2020, and I am Chip, and I'm your host, and thank you so much for listening today. If you're a new listener, thank you so much for joining us as well. If you'd like to share our podcast, you can find us over on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. If you'd like to watch us, you can watch over on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more episodes. And today we're talking about all the Week 4 matchups. I'm going to give you all my start sits for the week and break down all the games and players in those games. But first, the biggest news today is the NFL has finally rescheduled the Titans and Steelers game. Now, we all know what's going on. The Titans had a lot of COVID, positive cases throughout the week. They were trying to postpone the game from Sunday and hopefully play Monday or Tuesday. But more additional players had tested positive. I know Adam Humphries was one of the players that now is put on the COVID list for the Tennessee Titans. So rather than trying to force the game this week, they're going to push that game back. And so based on the new cases, based on how they're going to reschedule the game. So the game between the Steelers and the Titans, which was postponed from Sunday, it will be actually rescheduled for Week 7 on October 25th at 1 p.m. So they will now move. Obviously, now this makes the Titans and the Steelers bye week this week. And then the game that the Steelers and the Ravens were going to play will be moved from October 25th to November 1st. So that means that week 8 had a bye. The Pittsburgh Steelers had a week 8 bye. And then, so that just kind of changes, obviously, the bye week from this week from week 8 to this week. So that's the biggest news. And, right now, looking at what happened with the Minnesota Vikings are still coming up with negative cases. So the game this weekend against the Texans should not be in jeopardy unless something happens and there's an outbreak. Based on the Tennessee Titans, if they continue to have positive cases come up, the game next week could be in jeopardy as well. So I hope it's something that, gets taken care of and hopefully contained, because it's one thing to try to move one game, based on the bye weeks. It was lucky enough to have a bye week later on in the year, but it'll be interesting to see if something happens again with the Tennessee Titans, if they don't have any negative cases coming through. Hopefully they have a couple of days where there's going to be a negative case, but right now that's the tentative dates for the rescheduling of this game that will not be played this weekend. But the good news is that it's almost like you have to treat this as a bye week. So like last night, if you listen to the podcast throughout the week, I play in a 2-quarterback league, and Big Ben is my second quarterback. So I have Joe Burrow and I have Big Ben. So I have Sam Darnold as my backup. So Sam Darnold was put in as a spot start for me last night. So he actually did a pretty good job. So I was pretty excited about the points that I got from Sam Darnold. But you just have to treat this week as a bye week. Hopefully there's like this one isolated case where everything gets taken care of. They're able to find a way to contain it. And so there's not any more positive cases. But we knew going on to the football season, we knew that this was possibilities of happening, where we weren't going to be sure of how it's going to happen, how they were going to handle it. But it looks like this is what is going to happen. So obviously the NFL is going to put more restrictions on the teams. I think I read something this morning that said that the teams now on bye weeks cannot leave their hometown of the team at the city that they play in. So very interesting. I know that Eric Ebron tweeted something out that we don't realize how this personally affects NFL players. And Eric Ebron had tweeted out that he has a child's birthday party that was scheduled for the Week 8 bye that they had. And then with them being NFL players, they're always on the road. They're not seeing their family very much. So obviously, as a parent, it's one of those things where now he's pissed off because, and rightfully so. I mean, when you schedule something when it's your child's birthday or anything that has to do with your kids, he had came out and said, look, like this sucks because like now I'm missing my child's birthday. So we have to realize like everyone's human. even though it does affect us from an entertainment standpoint when it comes to fantasy football, we do have to realize these are human beings, right? So we have to have compassion, and it does suck where, players are missing out on family gatherings because things get changed when they had planned something for the week of their bye and all that. So just something to think about. It does, from a competitive standpoint, we have to realize like fantasy football is fantasy, and we have to realize these are human beings that are dealing with real life things. And I hope that everyone from the Tennessee Titans, is healthy. They're able to recover quickly, and hopefully this is a way for the NFL to really bunker down now and try to contain as much as can so we don't have another outbreak. So with that being the case, let's go into the Thursday night, recap. So last night, the Broncos and Jets played. It didn't seem like it was going to be a very entertaining game. The NFL Network was trying hard to market this game, but it was hard to get excited about the Jets versus Broncos. But, the Broncos, they won 37-28. And honestly, it was actually a decent game to watch. Brett Rippon, he went for 19 for 31 for 242 yards and 2 touchdowns. Unfortunately, he had a few turnovers as well. And then Sam Darnold, he went 23 for 42 for 230 and a rushing touchdown. And by far, his rushing touchdown was one of the best things I've ever seen in the sense of a quarterback rushing for a touchdown. I mean, he went over 40 yards and he broke a couple tackles, juked somebody, and it was one of those high-low moments because you see that play, you're like, okay, Sam Darnold came to play. Then a few series later, he gets slammed to the ground, busts his shoulder up, and then now we see Joe Flacco in the game, and then we see Sam Darnold come back out in the next series and play. So up and down roller coaster. But if you had Sam Darnold, you had a decent outing. I played him like I said, and I got 24.75 points from him. So I can't be mad at that. That's a great showing for Sam Darnold, even though he missed a series there in the game. But from the fantasy standpoint, I mean, actually, there was some good pieces here. Melvin Gordon had a good game. He had 25.8 PPR points. So, if you played Melvin Gordon, good game from him. He had a long run at the end of the game to kind of seal his fantasy week. So, good game from him. Wide receiver-wise, Tim Patrick, the second wide receiver for the Denver Broncos. He had a good game. He had, 23.3, fantasy points. Good game by him. Jerry Jeudy, he had a long touchdown, which should have been intercepted, but it was one of the craziest catches I've ever seen because there was no way that guy was catching the ball, and Jeudy came down with it, scored a touchdown. But, the cornerback that missed that interception in the beginning of the game against Jerry Jeudy, he had a pick 6 later on in the game, so he made up for it. But the Jets still fall to the Broncos. And then on the Jets side of the ball, other than Sam Darnold, not really a lot of fancy relevance here, other than Jameson Crowder. Jameson Crowder had 17.4 PPR points, and he went over 100 yards for the day. So good outing for Darnold, good outing for Jameson Crowder, but everyone else on the Jets, not so much. So it's just one of those things to determine how does the Jets go from here? Where do they go? Do they keep on with Adam Gase? Do they continue with the progression that they're on, or the lack of progression that they're on? So very interesting. But Sam Darnold, like I said, not a bad night for him. So with that being said, let's go ahead and go into some of the Week 4 matchups. The first game that I'm going to cover right now is the Saints versus the Lions. Now, the line for this game is the Saints are favored by 4 points, and this is a pretty high over-under. It's 54.5, so they expect a shootout here. When it comes to startable pieces in this game, Alvin Kamara and Kenny Golladay are the must-starts in this game. I think, obviously, Alvin Kamara's having a lights-out season so far. He's averaging 2 touchdowns per game, and I think that trend continues against a really bad defensive front and the defense as a whole for the Detroit Lions. And then Kenny Golladay. Kenny Golladay, he had a touchdown last week. He was the leading receiver for the Lions. He does have a tough matchup. If he's going to go against Marcus Lattimore, that is not the sexiest matchup, but he definitely, if you have him on your roster, you have to start him. And then for a flex option, for me, Marvin Jones now goes back into being the number 2 wide receiver. So I think Marvin Jones does have some flex appeal in this game. Now, with that being said, he's going to probably be lined up against Janoris Jenkins, which is not a bad number 2 corner. But I do think that he does have flex appeal for this matchup. And then for the boom bust players for this game, I have Drew Brees is on that list, Matthew Stafford's on this list, The whole Detroit backfield, I'm not touching the backfield right now unless you're in a real bad spot where if you're missing some players from the Steelers or from the Titans. Maybe Adrian Pierce is a guy that you hope for the best because he's leading the rush attempts for the Lions. So he'll be the guy that I would consider in the flex if I had to. And then wide receiver wise for the Saints, Emmanuel Sanders and Traquan Smith, they're both boom bust candidates this week as well. 1 week it was Traquan Smith that had a good fantasy outing, and then last week Emmanuel Sanders had a good fantasy outing. So we just don't know exactly who's going to be the guy this week. So with that being the case, I have low expectations for those two. Now, on the flip side of that, Michael Thomas did practice this week. I don't anticipate Michael Thomas playing. He's still he's still healing and recovering from the high ankle sprain. So I do think that Michael Thomas, even though he's practicing on a limited basis, he still needs some time to recover. I don't think he's going to play this week. So Michael Thomas, he's definitely going to be a sit for me. And even if he did play, I'm not sure how effective he was going to be because we've seen like Saquon Barkley and then Alvin Kamara, when they first came back from their high ankle sprains last year, they were not very effective until later on in the fantasy playoffs. So I think Michael Thomas, if he's on your roster and he is active, you can put him in your lineup, but just expect to have just low expectations because I don't think he's 100% healthy. I think they do have a week 6 bye, so I think that they may just keep him out for one more week for the week 4 and week 5, and he comes back after the bye. So that's my guess on that. But if you have Michael Thomas, you see that he's active. Just see what other options that you do have, and if you're definitely in a pinch, you could play Michael Thomas, but he's a guy that I wouldn't play. And then Jared Cook, at the tight end position, you can play T.J. Hawkinson. He's a guy that obviously is a start. He's that fringe tight end 1, and the same as Jared Cook. Those two guys at the tight end position are very on that low end tight end 1 ranking this week. But if you need tight end help, those are two guys that you can play in this game. And then going on to the Seahawks versus the Dolphins, the Seahawks are favored by 6.5 points. It is a 53.5 over under. Now, this is going to be a tough road game for the Seahawks. They have to fly from Seattle to Miami. It's not a fun flight. It's about 6 hours, and there's a chance of a thunderstorm. So this game could get ugly. It could be considered a ground and pound type of game. But regardless, you're going to play Russell Wilson. You're going to play DK Metcalf. You're going to play Tyler Lockett. Those guys are on fire right now. Regardless if there's weather, whether that's going to be on the rain side, you're going to play them regardless. They play we have a bunch of rain here in Seattle. They play a lot in Seattle, obviously in the rain, so it's not going to be anything that's going to phase Russell Wilson. But on the Dolphins side of the ball for the must starts for this game, Myles Gaskin is a guy that I'm going to start. He is definitely becoming that lead back in the Dolphins backfield. He's a guy who's getting all the receptions out of the backfield. He's getting the rush attempts. So I think Myles Gaskin is definitely a good fit here for a start. And then on the Dolphins wide receiver position, I think that Devontae Parker is a good option here. The Seahawks are dead last in pass defense. So I think Devontae Parker and Preston Williams are two guys that you can play this week. I think Preston Williams is more of a flex option this week. He's more like that wide receiver 4 range just because he just hasn't looked the same since coming back from the ACL injury. But because it's a plus matchup, they're playing against one of the worst pass defense, I think that's a good play. And at the tight end position, I think Mike Gesicki is a must start. He's definitely has warranted that role. He's now in that tight end 1 discussion. So I think you continue to play Mike Gesicki if you have him. And like I mentioned in the flex, the only guy that I have on this game in the flex is going to be Preston Williams. Now the boom bust candidates for this game, I have Ryan Fitzpatrick. So if you're out Ryan Tannehill or Big Ben this week and you need a spot start, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick, you could do worse, right? Fitzpatrick, he's going against, the defense for the Seahawks is middle of the road overall, but they're, like I said, dead last in pass defense. So I think Ryan Fitzpatrick could have a very good game against this secondary and could be surprised. So if Ryan Fitzpatrick is on your waiver wire and you need that pickup because of Tannehill or Big Ben being out, I'll grab him and play him. And then in the backfield for the Seattle Seahawks, I have Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde in this position only because Chris Carson is dealing with a knee injury. It looks like he's going to play, but I don't know what his usage is going to be this week. So be careful if you have Chris Carson, if you play him, because he may not get all the snaps. And this is where Carlos Hyde comes in. Of course, Carlos Hyde is the backup, but he's dealing with a shoulder injury. So Travis Homer may be the guy that gets majority of the work this week, only because these two are not 100% healthy. So I have them in this boom bust category. And then also I have Jordan Howard in this category because we've seen Jordan Howard throughout the season get all the goal line work. So if you're desperate, you need to play somebody in the Dolphins backfield. Jordan Howard, if you can't get Gaskins, obviously you're going to hope for a touchdown because he's not going to get the bulk of the carries unless they're within the 5-yard line. So Jordan Howard could be a spot start if you're desperate for running back help. And then going on to the Chargers versus the Bucs. The Bucs are favored by 7 points. The over-under is 43.5. In this game, you're going to start Tom Brady. You're going to play Ronald Jones because Leonard Fournette is now out for week 4, potentially week 5. He's dealing with an ankle injury. So Ronald Jones is a guy that you can start in this game. Obviously, you're going to start Austin Eckler. You're starting Mike Evans. You're starting Mike Evans every week, but now Chris Godwin's out with a hamstring injury. He's going to be out for week 4 and possibly week 5 as well. You're going to start Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen right now is on fire, and he had 19 targets last week. Now, the Bucs defense is an underrated defense. Now, they are middle of the road. The last year, they were dead last in pass defense. They're middle of the road now, so that they improved in their passing defense, and their rush defense is top 5. So, Austin Eckler, that it's a good pick. The start, if you have him, obviously you drafted him to be your number 1 running back. But the Bucs defense is a lot stronger than people realize, and I think that expectations should be low for this game in a sense of what I doubt that you'll see Austin Eckler have a blow-up game like he did last week. And then in the tight end position, I'm playing Hunter Henry. He's a tight end. He's the number 1. He's a tight end 1 this week. And then at the flex, I think Joshua Kelly. You have to consider him in the flex because he's getting the bulk of the carries. Austin Eckler is being used as well, but Austin Eckler is used as a receiver more than Joshua Kelly is. So I think if you need help, he's a good flex option. And then the boom bust players for this game is obviously going to be Scotty Miller and Justin Watson. These are 2 receivers for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that obviously will get an uptick in targets because of Chris Godwin being out. But if you have better options, go for those better options. But if you're just strapped for a wide receiver and you're playing in a deeper league, then Scotty Miller becomes an interesting prospect because he's one of Tom Brady's favorite targets. And then in this game, I'm not playing Justin Herbert. I know he's had a couple good games, so far, but I'm not going to play a rookie quarterback against, a Bucs defense that's on fire right now. And then Mike Williams, he is out this week, so do not obviously put him in your lineup. And then I'm still waiting on what Gronk is going to do in O.J. Howard. Last week Gronk had a decent game. He had 6 receptions for I think I was like 48 yards or 50 yards. So he's a guy that it looked like he was more involved in the game plan this week or last week, but I think that Gronk and O.J. Howard is still a let me wait and see type of move for me because I can't trust what they're going to do week to week. It's just like the running backs. I can't really tell what they're going to do with running backs. So one week is Ronald Jones, the other week is Leonard Fournette. So that's a wait and see approach for me at tight end position. And then going on to the Colts versus the Bears. Now, the game is favored by the Colts by 2.5 points. The over-under is 43. The must starts in this game. You're starting Jonathan Taylor. You're going to start David Montgomery. He's having a decent season. He looks a lot different this year. Tyreek Cohen's out, so obviously that will give him the bulk of the carries. You're obviously going to play Allen Robinson. And then I think at the tight end position, you can play Mo Alley Cox. I think this is a good option. He's definitely having a good, he's strung along a couple good weeks fantasy-wise. So I think that he becomes an option where you can put at your starting position for the tight end. And then at the flex, Nyheim Hines, I think every week he's a flex option just because he, especially PPR leagues, he's involved in the offense. I think week 2 was a very anomaly type of situation for him. So I think that Hines continues to become a good PPR option. And then, T.Y. Hilton for me, it's going to be interesting how this plays out because he's not having a decent season so far. And, you have Paris Campbell went out and then Michael Pittman Jr. went out last week. So right now you only have T.Y. Hilton and Zach Pascal. So I think that T.Y. Hilton, he's a guy that you still have to play. He's still a guy that you will at least be in your flex. So not a bad option at wide receiver there. And then when it comes to boom bust, so Anthony Miller becomes a boom bust for me in this game because I have no idea how Nick Foles is going to target him. He's a guy who plays in the slot most of the time. So when it comes to Nick Foles, I have no idea how that's going to play out. And then this is going to be an interesting guy too as a boom bust candidate is Cordero Patterson. The Chicago Bears have been using Patterson in the running back position, and now with Cohen being out, how does that affect what he does now going forward into the Bears offense? So that's going to be an interesting game and an interesting, scenario that I'm going to be watching on Sunday on how they use Patterson, because he may be a worthy waiver wire pickup next week because Cohen is now out for the season with a torn ACL. And I think Jimmy Graham becomes a decent play this week. I think that Nick Foles targeted him a lot on Sunday. He scored, he has 2 touchdowns. So I know that if you're out a tight end this week, I mean, you have to spot start some people. It's not ideal, but Jimmy Graham is under consideration for that. And then you're not going to play Nick Foles or Phillip Rivers unless you have to, unless you're in a 2-quarterback league. But I want to see how Nick Foles does in the starting role right now with the Bears offense having some of the weapons around him. So it'd definitely be interesting to see exactly how this game plays out for the Bears. And now moving on to the Jags versus the Bengals. The Bengals are favored by 3 points. The over-under is 48.5. I think in this game, I have no problem playing Gardner Minshew. I'm playing in my 2-quarterback league. I think Joe Burrow becomes a very interesting piece here. I have confidence in him going forward. He's shown enough so far in the first 3 weeks that I feel confident playing Joe Burrow. And I think the matchup is good. The Jags defense is not what it was. Joe Burrow has all of his weapons, so I think this is going to be a decent matchup for him. And you're starting James Robinson. James Robinson now, I believe, is now a startable piece every single week. He is obviously the only guy in the backfield that's going to get all the touches. So James Robinson is now having, a great season so far, and I think that he deserves to be started every single week. And Joe Mixon, though, you have to play Joe Mixon. You can't shy away from him right now. You draft him to be your, one of your starting running backs. You have to play him. I know he's not having a good season, but it's just like last season. He had a very bad start, and then he turned it on. So hopefully one of these games it's going to happen where he doesn't score a bunch of points and you have him on your bench. So I think Joe Mixon is a guy you still have to play. And then DJ Chark is going to be back for the Jags, so I think he's the number 1 receiver. You're going to play him. And then Tyler Boyd is another starting piece in this game that I think is a good piece to start. Now in the flex, I have Keenan Cole in this position. I think, with depending on how the Bengals pass defense is not very good, so I think this is why I think Gardner Minshew is going to have a good game. And with DJ Chark, I think he has a good game as well. But, Keenan Cole is a good slot receiver, for them. I think Laviska Shenault Jr., he's going to be a good flex option there as well. And I have AJ Green in this category only because he hasn't, the targets have been there. They've missed on like 6 touchdowns so far this year. And I think it happens, but I do still think it's, unless you have a better option than AJ Green, I think AJ Green should be in your flex at the very least. And then the boom bust candidates right now for this game is Giovanni Bernard and T. Higgins. Now, Giovanni Bernard is getting a lot more usage than we anticipated. That's why, we see that Joe Mixon's not having such a good fancy year because they're using Giovanni Bernard a little bit more. So that's a guy that, if you need that hope for the best situation, you got Giovanni Bernard's there. Now, T. Higgins is a very interesting piece as well, only because last week John Ross was a healthy scratch. So they decided to make John Ross inactive. And then they brought in T. Higgins. Now, T. Higgins had 2 touchdowns. Now, that's not going to happen every week, but it'll be interesting to see what his role is going forward as the number 3 wide receiver. So I think that he's definitely a guy that is a boom bust candidate. And then here, the sits for this game, there's really not a tight end you can play in this game because, Drew Sample is making a lot of talk because he's the starting tight end for the Bengals. But as of right now, he only has 9 receptions on 10 targets, and he only has a total of 53 yards and no touchdowns. So Drew Sample is one of those names that keep on floating around, but he hasn't done anything so far to warrant a start. So I'm not starting any tight ends in this game. Now moving on to the Browns versus the Cowboys. Now this is a high over/under. The over/under is 56, and then Dallas is favored by 4.5 points. You're going to start Dak. You're going to start Zeke. You're starting Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt's a startable piece. Now, he has been dealing with a groin injury this week, so he did practice on Friday, which is good news. So I think that Kareem Hunt becomes, at the very least, a flex. and you're going to play the big three. What I mean by that, you're playing Amari Cooper, you're playing Michael Gallup, and you're playing CeeDee Lamb. I think these are three guys that need to be started every single week just because of the offense they play on, and it's one of those things where, especially for CeeDee Lamb is playing 91% of his snaps in the slot. He's a mismatch for anyone that he goes up against in the slot. So I think CeeDee Lamb has a good game. And then you're going to play OBJ. It's hard to bench OBJ. I did last week in one of my leagues. It didn't, it worked out for me, thankfully. But he's a guy that I play on matchups now. If I have good wide receiver depth, OBJ is a guy that I would consider benching if I have better options, for the week. But, OBJ is such an elite talent that the Dallas Cowboys pass defense is garbage as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if he has a good game. And then in the flex, in this game, I think Jarvis Landry is a decent piece. I mean, they're a run-heavy offense, so obviously the opportunities for targets is very minimum. Baker Mayfield's only throwing the ball about 23 to 25 times a game, so targets are very, very hard to come by. So, he's a decent flex option if you need the help. And then the boom bust for this game is Dalton Schultz. He's a tight end for the Dallas Cowboys. He had a good week 2. He didn't really do much in week 3, but it's like I say, if you need tight end help, he's a good guy to lean towards. And then you're going to sit Baker Mayfield and Austin Hooper. I think that if you have to play Baker Mayfield, that means that you don't have better options available to you, which I understand why you have to play Baker Mayfield. And with the over-under being so high, I can see that the Cowboys could be in a shootout, or if the Cowboys get a huge lead, that means that the Browns are going to have to come from behind, so that gives Baker Mayfield more fancy appeal. So I do think that he is a sit for me, but it all depends on what you have available to you this week going forward. So with that being the case, let's go over to the Ravens versus the Washington football team. Now the Ravens they're favored by 14 points. That's crazy. I mean, I think that's the highest point differential this week, and the over/under is 45.5. Now, this week, obviously, you're going to start Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's the quarterback you're starting. Antonio Gibson is going to be the guy that you're going to start the running back position because he's the lead guy now. And then Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews are startable pieces. I understand they had a bad week, week 3 against the Chiefs, but you're going to play them every week. You're starting them. And then I think Logan Thomas is a startable piece here as well because Terry McLaurin may be out this week. So he is practicing still. He was limited on today's practice, but it's not trending in the right direction. So Terry McLaurin could be out, but if he is going to play, being nicked up and then playing against the Baltimore defense, I don't like Terry McLaurin this week. I think if you have to play him because he's one of your best receivers, I get it. But if you have better options, I think Terry McLaurin has a bad combo of being nicked up and then obviously playing the Baltimore defense. And then the boom bust for this game, the Ravens backfield. It's hard to determine who's going to be the guy who's going to be in the Ravens backfield. You got Mark Ingram, you got J.K. Dobbins, and you got Gus Edwards. Each guy is leading in certain categories, and I'm staying away from the Ravens backfield until there's a definite starter out there. So they're always going to be in my boom bust category, until I see someone emerge from that backfield. And then obviously you're not playing Dwayne Haskins in this. This is a horrible matchup for Haskins, and there's been talk that Ron Rivera may go to Alex Smith if Haskins does not improve. So that's going to be interesting what takes place over in Washington. Now going on to the Cardinals versus the Panthers. Arizona is favored by 3.5 points. The over-under is 51. Now you're going to start Kyler Murray, obviously. You're going to play Kenyon Drake. You're playing Mike Davis. And now this is going to be an interesting piece. DeAndre Hopkins, he's been dealing with an ankle injury. He did not practice on Friday. So DeAndre Hopkins is now a guy that you have to watch throughout the weekend on what is being said on the reports of how he's doing, because it looks like he may not play Sunday. So it makes it a very interesting case for Larry Fitzgerald and Andy Isabella. So the targets have to go somewhere. So if Christian Kirk's not playing and they're out DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, you have to play somebody in a pinch. Then, Larry Fitzgerald and Andy Isabella become options there. Also, startable pieces for the Panthers. You're playing DJ Moore and you're playing Robbie Anderson. They're having DJ Moore's having a very slow start to 2020, but Robbie Anderson's having a good season so far. So I think those are startable pieces. And then as a boom bust candidate, you're going to play Chase Edmonds if you have to, if you need the high upside. Just because like I said, if Hopkins is out, I think a lot of pieces on that offense have, some appeal based on the targets having to go somewhere else. And Chase Edmonds is a very good wide receiver out of the backfield. And then you're going to sit Teddy Bridgewater, and you're sitting Curtis Samuel. And there's not a tight end in this game that you're going to be playing. Now going on to the Vikings versus the Texans, you're starting the must starts for this game. You're playing Deshaun Watson. You're playing David Johnson, Dalvin Cook, obviously, and then you're going to start Adam Thielen. Now, as a flex, I think the only person I have in the flex for this game is Justin Jefferson. He's becoming he's the number 2 option now with the Vikings. He had a breakout game in week 3, so I think Justin Jefferson becomes a very appealing option there. And then my boom bust candidates for this game is pretty much the whole wide receiver group for the Houston Texans. I mean, Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, and Randall Cobb. We don't know who's going to be the one who stands out for the week. Last week it was Randall Cobb. He had 5 receptions for 95 yards. But Will Fuller did have the touchdown, so it's like, really don't know exactly. I would rather wait and see for these guys to see who kind of breaks out for this, wide receiver group. But right now, I'm not going to play any of the wide receivers for the Texans. And then you're sitting Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is not having a very good start of the season. And then you're not going to play any tight ends from this game. And moving on to the Giants versus the Rams. The Rams are favored by 13 points, so this is the second largest point differential for the week. And then the over-under is 48. You're playing you're going to start Jared Goff. You're starting Darrell Henderson, obviously Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee. So you're pretty much any main piece of the Rams offense you're starting. And then for the Giants, I think the only startable piece for here is Evan Ingram. Now when it comes to the flex option for this game, I think that now Darius Slayton, he is a guy that is going to obviously be the wide receiver 1 right now. Him and Golden Tate are 1 and 2. But I can't trust it. It's funny because like today I was at the barbershop and I was sitting there in the chair getting my haircut, and the barber brought over a newspaper, right? And there was like fantasy section, and I was going through like looking at all the rankings. And the thing about fantasy football and being an analyst in fantasy football, it's all about your opinion, how you watch the game, how you look at the game, what your gut feelings are, and all that stuff, and your instincts. So I'm never ever going to make fun of anybody because there's no room for that. Like that's not, I'm new at this. I know there's people who watch this and probably think I'm, not very good at it, or, I'm still learning how to do everything. But when it comes to like rankings and everything, the guy had Darius Slayton at the wide receiver 13 this week. And I feel like that seems a little high, and I don't know the justification for it. Maybe there's something that he was seeing that I was not. But to see Darius Slayton be ranked number 13, and then Brandon Ayuk for the San Francisco 49ers was ranked 14. So he had those two guys very, very high on his list. I just don't think that's correct, just in my own opinion, my humble opinion, because Darius Slayton has to go against Jalen Ramsey. If he's going to be the guy that is the number 1 wide receiver and he's the biggest threat in that group, then I can't see Slayton being the wide receiver 13. But just a very interesting nugget there. I just felt like that was just based on, like I said, but it's based on everyone's opinion. So, everyone has the right to rank pillars where they want. But I felt like that's doing a disservice sometimes to people who maybe don't know fantasy as well, and they rely on your expertise, and then they see that they played Darius Slayton because they saw him ranked at 13th, and he becomes a guy that does nothing for you because, he was ranked way too high. But anyways, and then now going to the boom bust players for this game, I think Malcolm Brown becomes one of these guys. We know Darrell Henderson is going to be the starter, but we don't know how the touches will play out. We don't know how effective Henderson will be compared to Brown. It's just one of those things where if you have Malcolm Brown, you need running back help, and that's a guy that you can go for. And then Golden Tate, like I said, Golden Tate becomes the I would say 1A, 1B with Darius Slayton because of the injury to Shepard and everything. But he's a guy, if you need help, he's there. And then you're going to sit Daniel Jones, and I'm not playing anybody from the Giants backfield. I think this is by far the hardest thing to figure out. I think if you had to rank anybody the highest, I think it's between Devontae Freeman and Deion Lewis. But as of right now, I'm not playing anybody from that backfield because I want to see who emerges. and what it looks like when that person does. So right now, I'm not playing anybody from the Giants backfield. Now going to the Patriots versus Chiefs. Now the Chiefs are favored by 7 points. The over-under is 53. You're going to start Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, you're playing Cam Newton. You're playing Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Tyreek Hill, Julian Edelman, Travis Kelce. Those are all startable pieces. And then not really anybody I would put in my flex this week in this game. When it comes to boom bust candidates, I think obviously the Patriots backfield, just like the Giants backfield. The Patriots, if they get James White back, right? So Rex Burkhead had a huge game last week. Sony Michel had a decent game on the ground last week. Now with James White coming back, how does that determine how they use Rex Burkhead or Sony Michel? So James White, Rex Burkhead, you got Sony Michel, then you got Damian Harris coming back. That's just not a backfield I want to touch. That's a backfield that I'm going to wait and see what happens and then go from there. But I'm not playing anybody from the Patriots backfield unless I absolutely have to. And then N'Keal Harry becomes another guy that's a boom bust for me. He hasn't really done. He's been decent. I think Cam Newton has done more with him than Tom Brady has. But I think that he's a guy that you may have to play if you need to. But I think you probably have better options in your waiver wire or on your roster than N'Keal Harry. And then Sammy Watkins and Mecole Hardman become boom bust. These two guys at any moment could break off a huge play. And we know that the Patriots are very good. Bill Belichick is very good on taking away the number one option for any team. So last week we saw Darren Waller get shut down by the Patriots. But the hardest thing about this game is that who are they going to shut down? Are they going to shut down Travis Kelce? Are they going to take away Tyreek Hill? If they do, that leaves Sammy Watkins and Mecole Hardman there. So it's one of those things where that's why they're on my boom bust, because Sammy Watkins had like a 10 PPR points last week. Obviously, Mecole Hardman had that long touchdown. So there's appeal there because obviously you want any part of that Chiefs offense, but it's going to be interesting on who they decide to focus their attention on the Chiefs offense. So be interesting to see how the Patriots defense plays this game. And then going on to the Bills versus the Raiders. The Bills are favored by 3 points, so over-under is 53. Now, you're going to start Josh Allen. Josh Allen's having a phenomenal season right now. You're obviously playing him. You're playing him every week. There's no way you're not playing Josh Allen. Devin Singletary, he's a guy that you have to play. Right now, Zach Moss is coming back from injury. It looks like he's going to play on Sunday, but I think Devin Singletary is going to be the guy who leads the backfield. And then Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs is having a good season so far. He was kind of shut down last week against the Patriots. Now, the Bills' defense is good as well, so I'm just wondering what the expectations are for Josh Jacobs, but you still got to play him. He's still a elite fantasy player. You're playing Stephon Diggs. You're playing Darren Waller. In the flex, I think Hunter Renfrow becomes an interesting piece here. They're not going to have Henry Ruggs. Bryan Edwards is out. They now are going to be without... now they're going to have to play Hunter Renfrow. They're going to have to play Zay Jones. And then they have Nelson Aguilar, so... These guys here are going to be interesting pieces for the Raiders because they're missing, obviously, Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards. So they become boom bust candidates for me. And then same thing as for John Brown and Cole Beasley. These are guys that are having decent seasons so far, but are these guys that you have to play, as a must start for or in your flex. And then for sitting, you're going to sit Derek Carr, and like I mentioned, you're going to sit Zach Moss. Just because there's not really pieces there that I would not want to play Derek Carr against this Bills defense. And then moving on to the Sunday Night Football game. So we got the Eagles versus the 49ers. So the 49ers are favored by 7 points and over-under is 46. Now, you're going to play Miles Sanders, even though it's a tough matchup. The Eagles are decimated at wide receiver. The only person who practiced on Friday was Greg Ward. So I think Miles Sanders is a must start because of his wide receiving ability. Now, when it comes to the 49ers backfield, it doesn't look like Raheem Mostert's going to play this week, so Jerick McKinnon is banged up as well, so Jeff Wilson becomes an interesting piece. Whoever starts for the backfield for the San Francisco 49ers, you're going to play. George Kittle is back, so George Kittle becomes an option here. Obviously, you're playing Zach Ertz. And then from a boom-bust standpoint, I think Boston Scott is a very interesting name because if the Eagles are down all their wide receivers, they only have Miles Sanders and Zach Ertz and Greg Ward. I think Boston Scott gets used more as a wide receiver, so they'll have options there. Brandon Ayuk is a guy that you can play, but Deebo Samuel's now back. So Deebo Samuel's now returning. Be careful on how you determine how you play Deebo Samuel because just because he's coming back, we want to see how he's used in this first game back from his foot surgery. then obviously you're going to sit Carson Wentz. You're not going to play Nick Mullins, not playing Jimmy G, and obviously you're not going to play Greg Ward in this game. So for the last game of the week, we have the Monday night game, the Falcons versus the Packers. The Packers are favored by 7.5 points. This is an over-under of 56.5, so this is going to be a shootout, and this is going to be a very fantasy-relevant game. A lot of firepower here. A lot of games that could be determined based on this game alone. There's so many startable pieces for this game. So, obviously in this game, you're playing Matt Ryan, you're playing Aaron Rodgers, you're playing Aaron Jones. When it comes to the Todd Gurley, you're going to play Todd Gurley. You draft him to be your RB1, RB2, so you have to play him. Now, when it comes to the wide receiver position, the two guys, Devontae Adams and Julio Jones, are expected to play. So, there's still a chance that they could be inactive, but they're trending towards playing. So be prepared to have them in your lineups, but also be prepared to have a pivot just in case. And then obviously you're playing Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley's on fire right now. He is one of the top receivers in fantasy right now. You have to play him. And at the tight end position, you're going to play Hayden Hurst. So far, he's been decent throughout the year. I think Hayden Hurst is a good start at the tight end position. And then when it comes to being, a flex, the flex option here is Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Alan Lazard is now out. He had core surgery, so he's out indefinitely. So now Marquez Valdes-Scantling becomes a number 2 for the Green Bay Packers. So I think that he could have a decent, outing. Obviously, I think his upside is more of in the flex position. And then Russell Gage. Now, Russell Gage is an interesting piece here because obviously if Julio Jones plays, the expectations for Russell Gage will be minimized because obviously Julio Jones will get the targets, right? And then Calvin Ridley obviously is there as well. So I know that the first couple games out of the season, Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage were leading in target share for the Atlanta Falcons. But if Julio Jones is playing, he's healthy enough to play. And I think that kind of the upside for Russell Gage goes down. And then when it comes to boom bust candidates, I think Brian Hill is one of those guys because he is playing 27% of the snaps. He had a long run for a touchdown last week, so I do think that if you need running back help and you're hoping for a guy that could win you a week just because of one big play, Brian Hill becomes a startable piece in a sense, but have low expectations. And then from the tight end position for Green Bay, I think Robert Tonyan is a guy that could benefit from Alan Lazard being out. So he's scored 2 touchdowns so far this year. I think that, this is a guy that is kind of under the radar. He may be a guy that breaks out this game just because obviously they need to throw the ball to, they have Devontae Adams and they have MVS. So Robert Tonyan becomes an interesting piece here. And then obviously, like I said before, you're going to sit Alan Lazard. He obviously isn't even an option because he's out indefinitely. But I want to put that out there so you guys know that he's not going to be playing this week and he's out indefinitely. So now, when it comes to defensive streamers this week, the four defenses that I like that may not be taken in your league, I do like the Rams this week. They play the Giants, so I think that's a good matchup. I think the Bucs have a very good matchup against the Chargers. They're going against a rookie quarterback. They're a very underrated defense right now. They're top 5 in rush defense. They're middle of the pack in pass defense, so they're not the joke that they were last year when it comes to their pass defense. So they had a very good outing last week. I think they could have a decent outing this week as well. And then I think the Cardinals are a good option. And if the Colts are available somehow in your league, grab the Colts because they're going to have a good matchup as well. So those are my 4 defenses that you can stream. So obviously, don't forget to send any of your fantasy football questions to my email at chip@gridironfantasyfootball.com. I try to answer all the start sits that I can. I like having the dialogue with all the listeners. So if you can't email me, leave a comment down down and below in the comment section so I can answer some of the questions that you may have. But as well, don't forget to take all your players that you have injured that could be inactive for the week and put them in your flex. And especially you have a Sunday night game or a Monday night game, make sure you have places to pivot to just in case there's a surprise inactive. So get all the guys that may be injured, that could be inactive for week 4, get them into your flex so you can pivot. And then obviously tomorrow on Saturday, I go over all the injuries that are relevant for week 4. That YouTube video will come out tomorrow, so check that out. So please don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss that episode on YouTube. But best of luck to everybody in week 4. I hope you win. I hope they're able to kind of weather the storm with the Steelers and Titans not playing. But just look at it as a bye week. If your team has been pretty strong for the last 3 weeks and you somehow lose because you're missing, Henry, or you're missing AJ Brown or some other, or Big Ben, just take it as a bye week. Your team's still good. Just a matter of now. The good thing about it, on the flip side, you get to have these guys later on in the season. So now the bye week's out of the way. If there's no other like COVID outbreak, then at least gives you that push to make the playoffs and have some strong, fantasy play later on in the year. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, comment, and share the podcast. And on the next episode on Monday, I will be going over my week 4 reactions and all the fantasy studs for week 4. So like I've said before, please support the show. Please hit subscribe so you don't miss that episode. And if you'd like to follow us on social media, you can find us over on Twitter and Facebook at the Gridiron Pod. You can find us on Instagram at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So have a great day. Good luck in week 4. And then I'll see you guys on the Monday episode. Take care.